Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Girls in My Town, Essays by Angela Morales, narrated by Kyla García. Introduction. The job of the essayist, like any storyteller, is to chase a rabbit down a rabbit hole and see where it goes. When I started writing these essays, each piece began with a single image that appeared distinctly in my mind. A bowling ball, a stack of school lunch trays, my father's gun, a dying rat, a burrito, a lost dog, a pregnant teenager, my grandmother on her deathbed. For the longest time, these images haunted me, until I had no choice but to sit down and write about them. I discovered then that what began to reveal itself was a family portrait, one that allowed me to take a memory and examine it, turn it over and over. Gloria Steinem once said, "Happy or unhappy, families are all mysterious. We have only to imagine how differently we would be described, and will be, after our deaths, by each of the family members who believe they know us." Maybe, then, I wanted to understand some of the mystery of what makes a life, what makes a memory, why we remember what we remember. As I breathed life into these essays, they became my oddly shaped children, all lined up and standing side by side. My beloved orphans are now assembled into one family portrait, one that reaches back to the childhood of my grandmother and ends with my own daughter's childhood. It's an unconventional portrait, to be sure, but hopefully it illuminates a time and place and adds another perspective to the mix. A.M. Chief Littlefeather, where are you? Some sweet evenings when the sun had left a pink tinge across the Los Angeles skyline, and Raymore Electric, my parents' appliance store, had made them lots of money, my parents would develop a manic, hungry angst that led them, in a spontaneous fit of wanderlust, to places like car dealerships and jewelry stores. This same money angst once got me a black lacquered baby grand piano, and my mother her Zsa Zsa Gabor ring, a miniature diamond staircase that cascaded across her finger. One night, we drove home in a brand-new powder blue Lincoln Continental. Another night, we cruised home stroking the velour seats of a rust-red Cadillac. And one evening, thanks to Raymore Electric's good fortune, my sister and I got our first bowling balls. "Go on, pick one," my father said. My younger sister Linda and I studied the rows of bowling balls across the display. Shiny ebony for the purist, glittery swirls for the fashion-conscious. "Come on, man, show them what you've got," my father ordered the clerk. He paced the store, checking his watch every 20 seconds, while the nervous clerk fumbled with some 8- and 10-pounders. Because of my father's short attention span, Linda and I knew that we had to choose quickly. If we didn't grab a ball and run it over to the cash register, he might suddenly decide that we were already spoiled brats with too many toys, and that bowling balls were a goddamned waste of money anyway. So Linda grabbed the first one she could get her hands on, a chocolate white swirl pattern, and I grabbed a gold iridescent ball that reminded me of space dust and the rings of Saturn. "What about the holes?" my father said, his eyes darting across the store. "Where's the drill?" I was always amazed at how patient salespeople could be with my father, nodding at his demands, calmly answering his rapid-fire questions. The clerk winked at us and had us stick our fingers through a series of holes in a plastic disc, and then he jotted down our measurements. In a few minutes, he'd placed each of the balls in a vice grip, before lowering the chisel into the resin. When he'd finished drilling, the finger holes felt silky smooth, not bumpy and abrasive, like the chipped old loner balls we'd become accustomed to. Then the clerk engraved our names in capital letters, just above the finger holes, and rubbed white engraving powder in the crevices to make the letters stand out. "Pick a bag, too," my father ordered. "Hurry up! How the hell you gonna carry it without a bag?" As fast as we could, We grabbed a couple carrying cases and ran those to the cash register, too. That night, I slept with my new bowling ball, stroking it and pressing my cheek against the cool resin. I'm sure I dreamed about the weight of the ball in my hands, the fluid three-part movement of my right arm swinging back and then forward again, my right leg sliding behind the left, perfect tension across my abdomen and thighs, and hold it. The golden ball spins and curves into the headpin with magnetic force. And yes! Another strike. A new junior world champion. Youngest person ever to attain a perfect score. 10 strikes in a row. The elusive 300. I first fell in love with a bowling alley when I was 7 or 8 years old. Back then, Raymore Electric dominated every aspect of our lives. When I was a baby, my father built a warehouse on an empty dirt lot and then turned it into a disco-style appliance superstore filled with rows of refrigerators, walls of stereo consoles with 8-track players, television sets stacked upon other television sets, endless washers and dryers. Some people recall their childhoods back on the farm, running through cornfields or pecan orchards or pine forests. Long afternoons jumping through sprinklers and camping trips with stargazing and roasted marshmallows. I remember running through mazes of washers and dryers, refrigerators and microwaves, and the glorious machine oil plastic rubber smell of the inside of a new refrigerator. I remember taking long naps in an empty appliance box. Later, I would add to those memories the bowling alley that provided me with an escape from all those appliances. The bowling alley with its sugar-glazed lanes and soothing sounds of clanking wooden pins, the gentle churning of rock maple knocking around in the belly of the pin-setter machine. Each morning before dawn, my father would arrive at the store to check inventory and send electricians out on service calls. Then he would stand in front of the store, just staring at it, like a person contemplating a sunrise or a landscape. Hundreds of light bulbs from the 30-foot sign illuminated him as he puzzled over ways to lure more customers. Better window displays? Brighter lighting, maybe? More than anything, he must have been praying that Howard's appliance store, his biggest competitor, would simply burst into flames, that it would explode into smithereens. If my father was the brain of the business, my mother was the heart and the soul. Wearing cleavage-revealing jumpsuits and big, dangly hoop earrings, she would stand outside the store demonstrating the latest wonder of modern technology, the microwave oven. She'd offer customers toothpick samples of her microwave-zapped hors d'oeuvres, drunken barbecued weenies, and little slices of lemon pound cake. My father once said that my mother could have sold a dead raccoon. She'd say, "See? Isn't it fabulous? Just push a couple buttons and voila! Pot roast in minutes." Both my parents had grown up poor, especially my mother, whose childhood was spent traveling around California in an old, beat-up Woody. Her entire family, like Mexican Jodes, slept in corrugated tin shacks at night, and by day picked peaches or cotton under a blazing hot sun. Here, then, had arrived my parents' golden opportunity to extricate themselves from poverty, to erase the past. Now, if they wanted to, they could eat filet mignon every single night. We would have a ding-dong and a Twinkie in our lunchboxes, all the same store-bought sweets our parents had been denied their whole lives. Now my father drove a Mercedes-Benz or Lincoln Continental, and my mother drove a Cadillac. General Electric gave us complimentary trips to Waikiki Beach, where we wore pink flowery muumuus and ate pig on a spit, and macadamia nut ice cream. What a life. At the store, my father was always making us shake hands with sales reps from big companies like Amana and Motorola, guys in polyester suits who smelled of earwax and Old Spice, guys who would chuckle when they saw us and say, "Chip off the old block, huh, Ray?" And they were right. We'd inherited my father's stocky build, his short legs, his bow-legged gait. I'd also inherited my mother's crooked teeth and overbite, which earned me the nickname Bucky Beaver, both at home and at school. "Hey, Bucky," my father would say, "Would you hand me that hammer?" And my mother constantly puzzled over how to make us cuter. She gave us Shirley Temple perms and bought us red heart charm necklaces. She bought us lip gloss and little vials of Tinkerbell perfume. She took us shopping for matching sailor outfits with gold chain belts and wound shiny ribbons around our ponytails. No matter how hard she tried, though, sooner or later our buttons popped off our waistbands, our ribbons unraveled. We'd show up with traces of Cheetos and Three Musketeers bars smeared across our hands and cheeks. And in front of customers or sales reps, my mother would yank us aside, rubbing at our faces with Kleenex, tugging at our pants and whispering things like, "My God, what will people think?" Or, "Pull up your socks. Go wash that chocolate off your face." Bored out of our minds, we'd imitate my mother's microwave demos by putting on little shows for each other. We'd melt margarine with sugar and hot sauce, or whatever ingredients we could find. Sometimes we'd throw a wad of tinfoil into a microwave, and then watch it explode into lightning flashes and little sparks of fire. Other times we'd raid the secretary's desk and write stupid messages on every page of her "while you were out" message pad. "While you were out, ... Your boyfriend called." Message: "Your butt is too big. Ha ha ha." Then we'd alter the prices on the washing machines with a black Sharpie, from $210 to $2,100. Ha ha ha. And then we'd mess with the controls on all the television sets, so that when my father turned on a television for a customer, all the people looked lime green. One day, Linda and I managed to empty all the quarters from the Pepsi machine by coaxing the lock open with an assortment of small tools we'd pilfered from the refrigerator repairman's toolbox. We emptied the foot-long stack of quarters into a dirty sock, and Linda was swinging it around proudly as we half-heartedly argued over how we might spend it. That Stretch Armstrong doll that we'd been wanting from the pharmacy? A bean and cheese burrito and apple turnover feast from Tacolita down the street? Neapolitan ice cream sandwiches and Pop Rocks from 7-Eleven? All of the above? When suddenly my father appeared and snatched the sock right out of Linda's hands. "What the hell is this?" he asked, lobbing the sock up and down, weighing its value. He scanned the warehouse until he spotted the crooked, dented Pepsi machine, money door still ajar. Electricians had been kicking it for years, and the damage had taken its toll. "God damn it," he said. "You robbed my Pepsi machine?" Then he smacked our collarbones with the back of his hand, daring us to talk back. Little flecks of spit flew at us as he yelled. He started in with his usual lecture. "I worked when I was your age. I packed oranges. I built crates. He lectured us about the roof over our heads, the shoes on our feet, and the clothes on our backs. "I give you every damn thing you need. And now you steal? From me?" My mother, hearing the commotion, came to our rescue. She could sometimes pull key wires out of the time bomb before it exploded. She liked to make my father think that he was completely crazy, which, oddly, often calmed him down. "Oh, Raymond," she said nonchalantly, waving a hand. "What's the big deal? It's just a few quarters." "What's the big deal?" he asked. "The big deal is stealing. Stealing is not a big deal?" "Oh, come on. You steal from people all the time," my mother said, sighing, pushing at her cuticles. "God damn you," he said, glaring at her. "I work my ass off." We know. You work your ass off. Stop overreacting. You're being ridiculous." Though my mother's "you are so boring" routine usually made my father second-guess his anger, this time it had the opposite effect. "You can go to hell," he said. "In fact, you can all go to hell, you little shits." He smacked the sock down on the secretary's desk and stormed off. After he'd gone, my mother, who'd had it with us too, turned and said, "If I were you, I'd disappear for a little while." When we didn't move fast enough, she pointed to the back door and said, "Go! Do you want him to go psycho again?" We grabbed the sock, which turned out to have $50-some in it, and dashed out, running up San Gabriel Boulevard as fast as we could, giddy that we'd escaped. We ran past the 7-Eleven, past the Chinese liquor store, past all the cobweb-covered, abandoned insurance offices, until, like Oz, appeared San Gabriel Lanes, its geometric sign jutting over the sidewalk, framed by the purple mountains and the familiar orangey haze of Los Angeles. Through the smoky glass doors of the bowling alley, the blonde wood gleamed under dim lights, and the pins sat solid and predictable and upright. So to escape our father and a life of appliances, Linda and I became regulars at San Gabriel Lanes, just like the old winos at the bar, and those solitary, gaunt-faced men, hiding from what? Who could do the silent slide, the bowling maneuver in which the hand comes down so precisely, so close to the floor, that the ball makes no sound as it glides magically down the alley, rolling stealthily and forcefully with the subtlest side spin, hooking left toward the center until the pins explode with that unmistakable, deafening thwank, right into the pit. How I wished I could do that. After the Pepsi machine incident, my father would slip us $20 bills just to get rid of us for a while, even though he'd always say, "Do not forget, that's a loan, not a gift." $20 back then could buy a lot of bowling. We bowled until our arms ached and our fingers were rubbed raw. We probably could have broken the world record for most games bowled by a child in a single year. If Raymore Electric was our second home, San Gabriel Lanes became our third, and we lived in both places far more than we lived in our real home, which we saw on rare occasions, and mostly only for sleeping. One Saturday morning, I set off from Raymore Electric, lugging my bowling bag up San Gabriel Boulevard. At school, my teacher had given us a flyer advertising free bowling lessons on Saturday mornings, lessons to be provided by a real, live Indian. Sure enough, at the center of the commotion, just as the flyer had promised, stood the real, live Indian. This Indian wore a dazzling feather headdress, a white beaded leather jacket, and real moccasins. He was tall and daunting. "Hey, kids! Who likes bowling?" the Indian yelled to the crowd. Hands shot up in the air. Me, I do," said the crowd, a motley mix from the neighborhood, mostly latchkey kids like us whose parents had dropped them off for an afternoon of free babysitting. "Who wants to learn how to bowl?" More hands shot up in the air. Chief Littlefeather talked about the benefits of joining a bowling league, and then invited each child down to the lanes for free, personalized instruction. Gently, he held my wrist in his large hands and showed me how to angle it upward rather than sideways. He smelled like ivory soap, and beneath his feathered tunic, I noticed that he was wearing an ordinary white t-shirt. Between lessons, he kept pausing, saluting us and grunting, "Ho!" Then he'd slip back into verbose white man talk and explain some other secret, like how to let the right leg slide behind the left leg, and how to knock off both pins when confronted with the dreaded split. At the end of the lesson, anyone who wanted to could sign up for the Chief Littlefeather League, a 12-week commitment. I paid my $2.50 and got paired up with a boy named Ray Yanez, a short, heavy-browed 9-year-old who didn't joke around. Like me, Ray had come to win. "Shake her hand, Ray," his mother said, pushing him toward me. "She's your teammate." Reluctantly, we shook hands. Ray's hand was hot and sweaty, and it was the only time I'd ever actually touched a boy's hand, unless you counted square dancing in Mrs. Swanson's class, which I did not. "Hi, hun," his mother said, extending her hand. She wore lots of gold bracelets that jangled as she talked. "I'm Debbie," she said, squeezing my fingers. Isn't this going to be fun? Debbie had a Farrah Fawcett hairdo, feathered at the sides, and then curled into rolls of fluff that framed her face. I liked her right away. Sometimes there were benefits to having workaholic parents. My father certainly would have made a pass at Debbie, leering at her like a dog drooling over a pork chop. My mother might have been all friendly to Debbie's face, and then later said something mean, maybe about her stupid hair or her tacky jewelry. Maybe I was just making excuses, but I was glad my parents couldn't spoil it for me. During the next 12 weeks, all I could think about was bowling with Ray Yanez. In the darkened showroom at Raymore Electric, I studied the pro bowlers on 20 television sets, guys like Guppy Troop, who wore gold chains and sunglasses during tournaments, and women like the red-headed Betty Morris, who could play an entire game without ever once cracking a smile. I pictured myself and Ray in those tournaments, the announcer quietly narrating our moves, as Ray and I remained cool and humble, just like Guppy and Betty. Afterward, when the crowds cheered wildly, we'd remove our plastic wrist guards and bow curtly, our feathered hair blowing in the air vent's breeze. Ray and I quickly shot up the ranks of the Chief Little Feather League. Every Saturday, I raced to the front desk to grab a copy of the dot matrix score sheet that showed the previous week's team rankings and handicap results. While other kids goofed around and threw gutter ball after gutter ball, Ray and I kept nailing those pins. During that time, Ray and I never really spoke to one another, except to mumble, "Your turn," or "Good one," or occasionally, "Nice try." We never high-fived or jumped around, because we were not, as my mother would have said, bubbly. We were, in fact, quite the opposite of bubbly. Though neither one of my parents ever came to watch me bowl a single game, I didn't mind. I was used to being dropped off places, movie theaters, softball games, doctor's appointments. Even without fathers and with just one mother between us, Ray and I had a ready-made audience. Those old guys with their Bloody Marys, in between drags from their cigarettes, would pump their fists and hoot and howl for us. Ray's mom, too, never missed the opportunity to yell, "Way to go!" and "That's the way to do it." She'd beam at Ray, her pride and joy. She'd pinch his cheeks until he slapped her hand away. I looked at our winning streak as retribution. Even if at school Ray and I were not popular or cool, at the bowling alley we ruled. Shannon Crook, a girl in my class whose trademark was her automatically darkening glasses, had turned commenting on my ugliness into her personal hobby. She'd follow me around the playground, poking at my back with a stick and saying, "How can you live with yourself? Don't you puke when you look at yourself in the mirror?" At the bowling alley, though, I could have torn Shannon Crook to pieces. In fact, it was usually her face that appeared as a misty apparition before the center pin. I aimed and threw hard. At times, I could throw 4, maybe 5 strikes in a row. After I threw a strike, my stomach muscles felt hard as a rock, centering and anchoring me, and honest to God, little silver sparkles emitted from my pores. One day after league, after Ray and his mom had gone home and the bowling alley had emptied out, I stayed to bowl a few more games on my own. With nobody to distract me, my eyes stayed closely focused on the head pin. The weight of the ball felt just right in my hands. Every ball I threw ended in a perfect strike. No wobbly pins, just pure obliteration. They went down hard and loud. With each strike, the red neon crown flashed above the pin setter. I couldn't believe it. Guppy and Betty and Chief Littlefeather were by my side, whispering in my ear. My score began to enter the zone. I could scarcely breathe. Before that day, I'd lucked out with a high score of 202, respectable for a kid my age, but by no means extraordinary. Now I surpassed my previous score, as my golden ball gleamed and spun down the lane. In the final frames, the fever broke, but I picked up the remaining pins with dead-on spares. The final score, scrawled out in my own handwriting, totaled 274, the highest score I'd ever heard of for a kid. I stared at the numbers, reviewing my math, verifying that I'd added correctly. I wondered if I could be dreaming. And then I looked around to see if anyone had noticed. Where were the old drunk guys? Should I tell somebody? The desk clerk was busy disinfecting shoes or doing some other odd job. My heart pounded. Had anyone seen it? Would anyone believe me? Would anyone even care? If a tree falls in the woods but nobody's there to hear it, did it ever really fall at all? At the end of the league, Ray and I won first place. It wasn't even a contest, really. Chief Littlefeather showed up at the awards ceremony to present us with our trophies. I was glad to see him. I thought about telling the chief about my 274 game, but I just couldn't. He seemed too remote, too adult and important and kind to risk bothering with my small news. I wasn't much of a talker anyway. He congratulated us over the PA system and made us honorary Indians. Crowning us with feathered cardboard hats, he handed us our trophies, short pillars of fake marble with a tiny golden bowler on top. The tiny bowler was tensed up, poised to release the ball, and later he would remind me of Ray, a kindred spirit. That day, as we accepted our awards, Ray and I stood stiffly, clutching our trophies, barely smiling, eyes glued to the floor. Afterward, Ray's mother gave me a little hug, and Ray said, "Well, see you around." With my bowling bag in one hand and my trophy in the other, I lugged my ball back down San Gabriel Boulevard, back to Raymore Electric, the sun gleaming in hard pinpricks off the top of my trophy. Without Ray and Debbie to look forward to, bowling lost some of its charm. After that, I stopped talking. Then I started crying for no apparent reason. "Now what's the matter?" my mother said, exasperated, as if I were the kind of kid who cried every 10 minutes. To my mother, dark emotions, sadness, anxiety, fear, meant a malfunction of some kind, a breakdown in the machinery. "Nothing," I growled, choking back tears and swiping hard at my cheek with my sleeve. But instead of letting it go, she pressed on. "Did I step on your toe? Did I poke you in the eye? What did I do?" "Just leave me alone," I said. "Fine," she said. "Good," I said, wiping away more tears. By the time I had entered junior high, I was trying to forget about the bowling alley and the elusive 300. Even if I did bowl a perfect game, what difference would it make? Would some portal open up at the end of the alley, like a door into Narnia, revealing some snow-covered wonderland dripping with icicles? Would confetti fall from the sky, and would my picture appear on the front page of the newspaper? Would my parents finally be there in the audience, cheering me on and whistling? Suddenly, I felt embarrassed by all the hours I'd wasted. I felt embarrassed by having loved that stupid place at all. There it sat, like some nerdy boyfriend with taped-together glasses and high-water pants. I began to believe that bowlers, like Guppy and Betty, were not actually real people after all, but simply actors trapped inside television bowling tournaments. Real people with real lives only went bowling sometimes, like on Friday nights, and when they did, they brought other people along, people to joke around with. I didn't look the same either. By eating nothing but Melba toast and applesauce and swimming 100 laps a day, I'd lost 20 pounds. I now wore lip gloss to highlight my straight, gleaming white teeth, having survived the torture of braces, tiny rubber bands, and horrific metal headgear. The orthodontist declared me his biggest success. My mother's dream had come true. I finally wanted to be cute. Not homely, like poor Consuelo Moreno with her acrid body odor and sad orthopedic shoes. I wanted to erase my...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?